Sikkim 365 and Baylor Plus have teamed up to bring Baylor fans the ultimate content bundle. You can sign up now for $17.99 a month, a $5 monthly savings, and get instant access to all premium content on both websites. For more information, visit either sikkim365.com or baylorplus.com today. What's up, Baylor family? Welcome into Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. It's Wednesday, November 20th, and it's time for our weekly visit with Baylor Director of Sports Journalism, Jerry Hill. Jerry, before we get started into all of the major sports ongoing right now, there are a few things that we need to discuss, and that includes cross country's Ruth Camelli in the NCAA championships this week. And what can you tell about her season and everything that she's looking forward to as they get into the postseason?
Yeah, she's just had a great season. A freshman. And actually, Coach Barnett had coached her sister when he was at Auburn, so he kind of knew what he was getting. But she's been top 15 in all but one of the meets. That was the Big 12 meet, which Big 12 is loaded in cross country. But she finished fourth in the NCAA regional, and that earned her a spot in the NCAA national championships. And I believe this was the first individual since like maybe 18 that Baylor has sent to the national championships. So she's got a chance to be an All-American. I believe it's top 40 in the NCAA national championships. They are All-American. So hopefully she gets a chance to do that in this meet, because she's really ran well all year.
Yeah, that's awesome. So on top of that, NCAA individual tennis championships and doubles obviously happening in Waco. What does that outlook like for Baylor right now and moving in through the rest of the postseason?
Yeah, it was just a huge deal just to be able to host it. For one thing, as we talked about off air, the singles and doubles championships have historically been, they've followed the team championships in May. But the ITA and working with the NCAA, they decided to move the individual singles and doubles to the fall, and Baylor is hosting both that and the NCAA team championships in May. So a lot of tennis here in Waco, and this week, Devin Badenhorst won his first round singles on Tuesday, and so he continues on. He'll be in the round of 32. The doubles will start today. And Baylor has two doubles teams and two doubles teams on the men's side, a doubles team on the women's side. So we'll see how far they advance. The tournament goes through Sunday at the Hurd Tennis Center. So you can watch a lot of tennis this week, and hopefully Baylor has a good run. They're the number 2 seeded team, Marko Milanovic, and I believe it's Jambor Vels. They are the number 2 seed. So hopefully they make a good run and can be All-Americans as well. So it'll be fun to watch them and see how they do along the way. The finals are on Sunday.
All right. So also happening in Waco this weekend, number 9 Equestrian facing number 2 Texas A&M. Definitely something to keep up with. Baylor struggled a little bit, but they did break into the rankings of the Equestrian for the national rankings. And Texas A&M would obviously be a tough challenge, number 2. So with all of that, let's get into basketball. Men's basketball had basically 2 games after starting the season with 2 ranked opponents, kind of their warm-up games that they've had here against Sam Houston and Tarleton. Won both of those games convincingly, scored over 100 points in both of those games. Now are headed to the Baha Mar Championship in the Bahamas. We'll have a tough challenge there. St. John's, top 25 team to open it up, and then could potentially face number 11 Tennessee or Virginia, depending on if they win or lose. So what's the outlook for that tournament? And is this team, I guess, ready? I guess they are ready. They've already had 2 top 25 games, but it's going to be a challenge this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've kind of put Gonzaga behind them. That was just such a shocker, right off the bat. But, just kind of a worst perfect storm, I guess, in that setting when, Gonzaga had so much talent back and Baylor, with 1 returning starter. So I think they've kind of put that one behind them, beating a good Arkansas team in a neutral site, and then, kind of just taking care of business in these last 2 against Sam Houston and Tarleton. Tarleton, that was not a good team. Billy Clyde Gillespie, a great coach, great history, but his team, and I know they had some pieces missing too, but Baylor really played well in the last two. I believe scored 104 in both of those. So obviously they've got the offense going and really defense too. I mean, defense played well in both of those games. So they get a good test right out of the bat in the Bahamas facing a St. John's team coached by Rick Pitino. So you think about that, that he's faced, Coach Drew will have faced Mark Few, John Calipari, and now Rick Pitino, and even Billy Clyde Gillespie. You can throw him in there. So he's faced some really good coaches right out of the bat.
Yeah, that's really cool. So that first game is on Thursday at 6 p.m. against St. John's. Then follow that up against Tennessee or Virginia on Friday. The second game will either be at 6 o'clock or 8:30 p.m. Central Time. So it should be a fun weekend for the men's team. Women's are also headed to the Bahamas, which is really cool. They're not there at the exact same times, but they're both going to be there. They'll play in the Battle for Atlantis, following their wins over East Texas A&M and Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Pretty challenging field here as well. Talk about UNC, Texas A&M, and Indiana. It looks like it sets up pretty well for Baylor just looking at the bracket, but it will be a challenge. It's going to be hard to go undefeated. And what can you tell us about that weekend and the way they're playing right now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're playing really well. Kind of, again, just like the men, kind of took care of business. Beat East Texas A&M and then handled A&M Corpus Christi pretty easily. And that's a team that actually opened the season with a win over A&M. So I think that's a significant win, beating them like they did. Beat them, I believe it was 65-42. So a convincing win at home. And, so I think they do go in there with a little bit of momentum. That, again, they've put that Oregon game behind them. I think that was a game that if you had Bella Fauntleroy the whole game, or if you still had Jenna Van Gietenbeek, I think they win that game, but lost it by 2. I think they've put that behind them, and now they go into this tournament playing Southern Miss in the first round, possibly Indiana in the second round, and then a potential championship matchup with 16th ranked North Carolina. So there are, like you said, there are some good teams there, good Power 4, Power 5 conference teams. So I think it'll be a good tournament for them. And just playing 3 games in 3 days, that's not the easiest thing to do. And this is not a really deep Baylor team, particularly with Jana out now and the Florida transfer not in yet, Aaliyah Mathura. So until she gets in, they're kind of a little thin. So you hope they can get through 3 games in 3 days.
Yeah. So you look at Bella, she was able to come back and obviously play. And what's the outlook on her health right now? And I mean, I guess she's close to 100% if she's playing 29 minutes in that last game.
Yeah, I mean, first game back, she scored 15 points in 24 minutes, and I asked Nikki after the game if that was a surprise, and basically, now she did follow it up, but she was like, no. That was her immediate response was no, that was not a surprise. But when you saw it, in the Oregon game, because that was first 2 minutes in, and it just her foot kind of wound up on the floor, or her ankle did, so it just looked bad when it happened, and I know she had been or is in a boot just for protection more than anything else. But like you said, played 24 minutes in the next game, 29 minutes in this last game. So I think she's fine. She may not be 100%, but she's obviously getting treatments and all that, and she'll be good to go. Now, again, that's going to be hard for her. 3 games in 3 days on maybe a little bit of a sore ankle still. So, we'll see how she does in getting through that.
Yeah. So last game, 48 rebounds for this team. Is that going to be a strength overall? I mean, you look at the athletic ability of everyone on the court, the good size, but it looks like this is going to be a pretty good strength for this team going forward and getting into the tougher competition once again.
Yeah, and I think, a big part of that is having Nettie, Aaronette Volinet, the Colorado transfer. I mean, she gives you a big rebounder, a big presence inside. And then Bella's always been a good rebounder. Bugs, Dariana Littlepage Bugs, she's a great rebounder. And then the guards have kind of jumped in there. If I remember right, I think Sarah Andrews maybe had 8 rebounds in that game, in the last game. So, she's one that can get in there and rebound as well, depending on, if the ball comes off the rim the right way or whatever. So, yeah, I do think this will be a really good rebounding team because they, have some size both inside and outside. So, yeah, I think that will definitely be a strength for this team moving forward.
Yeah, that was looking at 53 rebounds against East Texas A&M and then 48 against Texas A&M Corpus Christi. And I mean, obviously, a lot of that predicates on playing good defense and getting those and offensive rebounds as well. But
Right.
those are really high numbers. I mean, I guess you look at men's games and you rarely see them get that high. But if you're dominating the glass against anybody, that's a pretty good indicator. So what can you tell us about the Florida transfer? I know that's a little whiles away now.
Right.
What is she going to bring to this team? And obviously the depth is a big part of that now, especially with Jana out. But how does she impact this team and the high-end potential for what they can do this season?
Yeah, I think she's going to be a combo guard, probably more at the shooting guard than point guard, but she can play some points, so that's good. I mean, she was, I think, the second leading scorer in the SEC last year at Florida, 19 points per game. So right there, I mean, you're adding an explosive scorer that can get to the rim, can shoot the three. So yeah, I think just adding her into the mix. And like you said, with Jana Van Gietenbeek out now for the season with an ACL, they really needed that depth, and actually, got her or at least got her committed before Jana's injury. But, now it looms huge that they were able to get her out of the transfer portal because, they really needed that depth. You thought going into the season, man, a lot of guards and even I, when they signed her or when they got the commitment, I was like, well, what do they need another guard for? Well, now you desperately need that. So I think that'll be a huge thing. And Yaya Felder, I think, has played a lot better in the last couple of games as well. So you kind of get her going more 100%. Sarah Andrews, both of them have been kind of limited in practice. So again, when you're already down Jana and then you've got those two playing, or at least practicing limited minutes, it's going to be great to get Aaliyah in here and really make a difference in that backcourt.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect her to come in and average 19 points again based on the makeup of this team.
Right.
But if she's getting anywhere close to that on every other game, every 3 games, that's such a huge boost. I mean, that's massive. And obviously with the injury, it's even more important. And maybe she comes in as a consistent double-figure scorer, if nothing else. I mean, it seems like that's what they're expecting. You don't add someone like that to come in and not shoot the ball very often, not have a big impact. So really anxious to see how that team gels. And I guess, truthfully, getting her for Big 12 play, this team's going to continue to gel and get better throughout the season. So maybe that sets up well once you get into the Big 12 tournament and obviously the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I think that will be a huge piece. And I guess what it does, Colt, is, gives them another scoring weapon where I think this team was already a little bit like, teams are going to struggle with, well, who do you try to take away?
Yeah.
Bugs was one that they tried to take away and did kind of take away in this last game. But they have so many weapons that it's hard to shut down, 4, 5, 6 weapons. So I think that's what she adds is just, another one, kind of another bullet in the gun, I guess. And, I think that helps a lot.
Yeah. So really anxious to see how this team gels together. The first game against Southern Miss in the Battle for Atlantis is on Saturday at 12:30 p.m. Central Time, and then kind of varies depending on wins and losses of what the rest of that schedule looks like. So big opportunity for them to go on and bounce back from that Oregon win. So let's stay on the court, but switch sports. The volleyball team went to Kansas, swept Kansas State, but dropped to Kansas. And I know that Kansas game was one that they were looking at and thinking, we win this one, we're in a really good position, not only for postseason, I mean, not only for the Big 12 standings, but helps your RPI, helps everything, helps your entire resume. They don't do it. They don't get it done, unfortunately. But now there's 4 games to go in the Big 12. They're sitting at 10-4. What's the outlook for volleyball in those final 4 games? It doesn't look like a Big 12 championship's on the table at this point, unfortunately, but still a really good season. And with the last 4, I mean, is there a chance they can go undefeated in those last 4 games and finish 14-4?
Yeah, I think they do. I think they do finish 14-4. They play Texas Tech tonight. Then they've got Houston, Cincinnati, and West Virginia. They should go, 4-0 in that and maybe even sweep them. So they were on kind of that stretch there where I believe they had 5 straight sweeps and then got swept by Kansas. But if you kind of look inside the score, all of those sets were close. So,
very cool.
I expect them to bounce back. Kansas is good. I mean, I think them and Arizona State have kind of elevated themselves. They're the top 2 teams in the conference right now. But Baylor's right there with Utah to potentially finish 3rd or higher in the league. So that's a great spot I mean, I know, you lose Texas, and certainly your hope was to maybe, sneak in there and win a conference championship in volleyball. That's probably not going to happen because Arizona State, since we beat them, they've reeled off 13 straight wins. So they're really good. They're a top 10 volleyball team, and they're going to be hosting first and second rounds. I was kind of surprised by the RPI a little bit that Baylor dropped 3 spots. They're now 20th in the RPI, so kind of outside of that top 16. I don't know if winning those last 4 will be enough to move them into the top 16 because none of them are great resume builders. Right. But if you do go undefeated there, at least you put yourself in the conversation for a host spot. If not, you're going to go on the road, but maybe to one of the lower seeded teams.
Yeah, I mean, if they finish in that 17 to 20 range, that's kind of the hope. You don't get as host, but you're in a position to win in advance, right, which would be big. Obviously, the higher seed you are, the better outlook that you have.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Let's talk football. I mean, obviously, that's a lot of people want to talk about it right now, whereas early in the season, not a lot of people were too excited. But after that 2-4 start, they've won 4 in a row, and I haven't looked back. I think it was the 2019 season that Baylor won 4 consecutive Big 12 games, excluding the Big 12 championship game, which 21, they won 4 straight, but it was the Big 12 championships against Oklahoma State. That was the 4th one. So you go back to the 2019, that's something they haven't done since then. And then obviously before that, I guess it would have been 2015. So it hasn't happened very often to win 4 in a row. Yeah. What does that tell us about this team and the direction they're headed? Because we know how evenly matched all of these teams, the parity in this league is. Anybody can beat anybody, and to win 4 in a row is very impressive. I mean, we just saw BYU, and obviously Kansas has struggled. BYU at the top of the conference loses at home. I don't know if anyone really saw that coming. The potential was there, but it kind of just speaks to how difficult it is to get winning streaks going in this league.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's impressive to win 4 in a row, and really play well. I mean, I can't think of a game in that stretch where they played, even badly or weren't on their game, I guess. So, yeah, I think this has been a really good stretch offensively. Defense has struggled at times, but, I think they've really – I don't know what happened in that first bye week, but, man, they have been a different team since then, particularly running the ball. The offensive line has played so well since then, and that obviously has been the key. They've done some good things, both defense and special teams. But to me, the key has been that running game with Bryson Washington, Dawson Pendergrass. I mean, they've really, kind of stepped it up and done the job. Bryson Washington scoring 4 touchdowns in each of the last 2 games. That's amazing. So, I like where they are right now and going into these last 2 games. Houston had a 2-game winning streak snapped against Arizona, but that's a team that's obviously played better since the beginning of the year. And then you get a Kansas team here that seems to be hitting their stride. Earlier in the year, they looked like they were going to be really, really bad, but they've kind of put it together and they've won some big games. And so that won't be an easy one in the season finale. But, man, you have a chance, Colt, to run the table and win your last 6, which would be huge going into a bowl game.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it before, but that 2012 season, so many similarities. And I think the one thing that I point to now, obviously the defense stepped up so big late in the season. You wait for the defense to take a big step. I think they've shown flashes. It's like the second half against West Virginia completely shut down what West Virginia was trying to do. Dave Aranda mentioned all the adjustments that they tried to make that didn't work. Then they finally found something that worked, and that's when it came together. And then he was upset about giving up the late touchdown. But the one thing that just continues to stand out to me is the similarities in the run game, specifically with Bryson and the way that Lake kind of emerged, Lake Seastrunk emerged in that 2012 season where no one could stop him late in the season. And that propelled them and obviously on to the Big 12 championship in 2013. The difference being Bryson's just a freshman, a redshirt freshman. Yeah. Lake was a junior that year, or I guess a sophomore that year. So similarities, but he was coming off a redshirt year. And the offense has just been – I don't know what as a defensive coordinator, what you decide to stop. Mm-hmm. Because I think West Virginia was in that situation of like, well, we want to stop the run. And then immediately Baylor went to that quick game, screen game to the edge, found success there. And then it just started rolling from there. And it just so many similarities, that 2012 team. And I'm with you. Like the defense is coming along. I think that's the best way to put it because they flash. but the offense has carried him to this. And now you just kind of hope that the defense can build on what they did in the second half against West Virginia, because they're going to need it. Not necessarily against Houston, but the Kansas game is going to be a challenge for what Kansas does with Jeff Grimes. Interestingly enough, will be back on the sidelines in a couple weeks. But with all of that, Houston struggles on offense, but we know what they do on defense. This is probably the toughest test. David Randa said it in his press conference. This is the toughest test that they've had. I wouldn't say all season. I think there's some you talk about BYU and now Colorado, the way that they've consistently played defense, but it's up there with the top 2 or 3 in the league that they'll face all season.
Yeah, I agree. And, when you're looking at it from a defensive perspective to offense, back to that a little bit, they've struggled at times, obviously did against, Garrett Green in that quarterback run. And so with Houston going with Zion Chris, that's a tough matchup. They've got to figure that out because, then you go back and look at the TCU using the Wildcat with Savion Williams. I mean, they've struggled in those situations. So that will be a big test for the defense. But yeah, this will be a really good test for this offense, to see, okay, have they really arrived? Because, they've put it together. I don't know that they've played, certainly not a great defense in this stretch. But they've played some decent teams. I looked at Colt. I think there's like a 5-way tie at 4-3.
Yes.
And Baylor's beaten 3 of the other 4 teams. So, so that's in that stretch. So it's not like you were, beating the bottom of the division or bottom of the standings. You were beating some good teams. I mean, think about where Tech was when Baylor beat them. So, it's just been a good stretch, and you'd like to see that continue. I know everybody was excited about getting bowl eligible, but I think there's more for this team. I don't think they're satisfied with 6. They want to, again, I think they want to run the table and kind of keep that momentum going.
Yeah, wouldn't that be something? I mean, we talked about a few weeks ago, I think it was, like, get greedy, and you're not just talking about bowl eligibility anymore. You're talking about 8 wins regular season potentially on the table. But then could you imagine going to a bowl game and getting 9 wins this season? I mean, it's on the table. I mean, there's a potential, which you don't know the bowl matchups until you get to that point. So until that point, everybody chalks that bowl game up as a victory, right? Like you say, yeah, it's a win, regardless of who you're playing. You don't even know. And you say, yeah, it's a potential win. But the reality is it's on the table, and you get to that, you have a month to prepare for whoever that is. And not to get out that far, but a bowl game is happening. We know that. We know with 6 wins, it is going to happen. So you can kind of look forward to whatever that matchup might be. But I want to talk about Sawyer Robertson, because I know we've talked about him, but he's playing at such a high level.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever he needs to do, you look at the Oklahoma State game, he threw it some, but he didn't need to throw it a lot. You look at the TCU game, he didn't score a single touchdown, but then he comes back against West Virginia. The game plan called for him throwing the ball, and he did, and has 3 more touchdown passes. It just seems like he can do whatever, lead this offense in whatever direction it needs to go to make it run efficiently. But I don't think he's a game manager either. I think he's a good quarterback. Like, you see some of these system quarterbacks, but he's not that. How impressive you been with Sawyer and kind of his emergence throughout the season? Like, it wasn't like a gradual buildup. I feel like it started from immediate. I mean, look at this Air Force game, take away those turnovers, and it started then, and he's done the consistent thing every single week of the season during this stretch.
Yeah, no, he's been impressive. I mean, when you think about basically a first-time starter, I know he got a few starts under his belt last year, but this is his first year to, kind of be at the helm for most of the season. So I've just been really impressed with him. He's very cool, very calm. I'm not saying he doesn't get excited. He does. He shows emotion, but I just think he's really steady. And like you said, he does what you need him to do. Some quarterbacks can't do those, the quick hits, out into the flat and stuff. Sometimes, they put too much mustard on it or whatever, and that can be a struggle, but he makes it work, whatever you need, whether it's those quick hitches over, in the flats, or if it's deep balls. I tell you what, Colt, and I'm sure you were watching, but that pass to Monterey, that was one of the best passes I've seen. I mean, I've seen a lot of quarterbacks, and that was just, I mean, you could not have put it in a better spot. And, he talked about it after the game, Sawyer did, and he said he can tell if the run or if the receiver changes his gears, whether he made a good or bad throw. And Monterey didn't. Monterey just,
Yeah.
I mean, it was
On the
in
money.
stride, perfect. So yeah, I just think he's kind of at a different level right now, and it's been fun to watch.
Yeah, his completion percentage, I don't know if this is the first time. I guess that the Air Force game, he was over 70%, but West Virginia game, he was over 70%. And that's kind of been his flaw was percentage-wise, it hasn't been great. I think he's usually around the 60% or lower mark and just kind of floats around there. But for him to go 70% was really impressive for him. Because his ability to run the football and everything that you throw into that, if he's completing 70% of his passes at the same time, that's encouraging. And now a lot of that had to do with the short passing game early on, getting those quick hitters to Ashton Hawkins and Josh Cameron. Obviously, the long touchdown pass to Josh was a quick pass for the most part. So that helped. But I think it just opens up the rest of the offense. So really anxious to see where that goes. But to finish this up about football, I want to talk about the defense in that second half against West Virginia and the way that they adjusted. And Dave Aranda's like, I got deep in my bag to get those adjustments. These next two games, I mean, Houston is arguably the worst offense they've faced this year, kind of down there in terms of statistics as Air Force. They should be able to do and have success in this game. If they don't, then you really worry about the Kansas game. What do you think Dave Aranda – I guess how can I phrase this? Do you think we've seen everything that Dave Aranda is capable of as a defensive coordinator this year? Or do you think there's still room for improvement for this program?
Oh, I think there's room for improvement. And I think he would say the same thing, because I think I asked him specifically in the Monday press conference, like, what specifically, will you work on, trying to improve on defense? And he did say then, at some point in the season, you are who you are, which you hate to hear that. But I think he definitely still has some stuff up his sleeve. He's one of the best defensive minds in college football. So I expect to see more. I don't know that you're going to have to in these next couple of games, specifically against Houston. Like you said, they just haven't shown much offensively. So, but, certainly for that Kansas game and then, the bowl game, whoever they play there, I think he'll have some things up his sleeve. And I do think he will get better. It'd be interesting to see if this is what they stick with. If he stays the defensive, I think he probably will. But maybe get some more help in other areas. So, but yeah, we'll see what he does these next couple of games. But I know for a fact that he's got more stuff up his sleeve.
Yeah. So, all right, Baylor fans, that's going to do it for this episode of Inside Baylor Sports. Thanks to Jerry Hill for joining us as always. Have a great Wednesday and stick 'em Bears.